Hello everyone. Hello everyone. Hello everyone.
In 10 days would leave the community stunned and authorities overwhelmed.
This was a story which was completely unprecedented.
As the clock ticked, the body count rose.
Made me wonder, how many more are they going to find?
And with it the question, what had driven Steve Wright, this quiet middle-aged man, to commit his killing spree?
Not in a million years you think he's ever capable of that.
Why did this happen? I mean, that's the $65,000 question.
Sunday, the 10th of December 2006. The tranquil market town of Ipswich was gearing up for the holiday season.
There was late night shopping and Christmas parties, yeah, very much the lead up to the festive period.
However, despite the festive cheer, there was an undercurrent of unease. In early November, 2 girls had been reported missing from the streets of the red light district. By the 8th of December, both their bodies had been found dumped in a nearby brook. The disturbing discoveries separated by just 6 days. Senior Investigating Officer Roy Lambert would receive a phone call that would thrust him to the centre of the newly unfolding drama.
Sunday the 10th of December, I was at home. It was about 4 o'clock when I got a phone call from Stuart Gold. He said, we've got a bit of a problem. So I said, what's happened now? And he said, we've had another body has been found of a young woman.
On arriving at the location on the edge of the nearby village of Nacton, he would encounter a haunting scene.
I remember when I arrived, it was about just after 4 o'clock. It was then dark. It was really, really windy, and the rain was absolutely lashing it down.
Although the scene of this sinister crime gave no immediate clues to the identity of the killer, that of the victim was soon established.
Quite early on, we could see from the scene there were some tattoos which gave us an indication who this person may be. It wasn't a formal identification this early on the Sunday evening, but we sent some family liaison officers to the mother of this young woman who turned out to be Anna Lee Alton.
What it was, I was actually shocked to see the image of Anna Lee lying naked and posed in the middle of these woods.
The killer's public display would give investigators an insight into the disturbed mind of the man responsible for this sadistic spree.
She'd clearly been laid out by the offenders. She was in a cruciform position, so her arms were out wide, and her hair, she had long peroxide blonde hair that had been pulled back in a conical form, and she was pristine, she was very clean, and she was naked, but clearly the offender had spent some time laying her out.
I was thinking, what are we in the middle of here? This is the third girl taken off the streets of Ipswich, found on land now in woodland, so we didn't know what was happening really.
The uncovering of a third body in only 8 days would prove unnerving.
It was almost a public display by the killer, because her body was left so close to the road. It was clear that she'd be found pretty soon. It seemed at that time almost as if the killer was perhaps taunting the police.
Things were happening so quick, it was actually difficult to sort of comprehend and get a handle on what in fact was happening to us in Suffolk.
What?
The genuine shock and fear
What?
in Ipswich was ramped up 100 times.
I assume so.
Pretty early on we found that Annalee was living in Colchester with a boyfriend. Initially we sort of said to him, well, why haven't you reported her missing? And he did say that he sometimes would go missing for 2 or 3 days at a time. He wasn't concerned.
Hiya, Patrick.
Hey, Patrick.
Where the hell is it?
Not a clue. Found him at Google. Create an account. Link existing account. Yep. He's just come up and said what it was. Oh, do it later. Do it later.
Okay.
Do it
Because
later.
I don't remember it.
Yeah.
It's been a long time since I've been on eBay.
Sign out.
Hiya, Patrick. How are you doing? Okay. Okay. Let's just say I'm in agony. Just when I bent down to pick something up, it caught me bad tummy. That's all.
About it, the last mother that afternoon and take some Christmas presents to her son. And in fact, when we relayed that to her mother did confirm that.
When we found out from Annalie's boyfriend that she was going to go to Harwich to see her mother on the train, obviously a lot of trains have CCTV these days, and so we looked, and in fact we did obtain some footage of her actually on the train coming back from Harwich towards Manningtree on that Sunday night, the 3rd of December. It gave us a starting point from when she was one of the times she was last seen alive. It also gave us a description of what she was wearing and what she was carrying, which is important for us that if we found any clothing subsequently. And in fact we got her not only on the train, we found further CCTV of her at the railway station and also later on the outskirts of the red light area later on that Sunday the 3rd of December.
While the inquest into Annalie's death continued, the results of the autopsy would provide police with a new piece of the puzzle.
The pathologist was able to give us a cause of death, and he described it as an interference with the airway, either asphyxiation or strangulation.
News of the discovery of Annalie's body would travel fast.
We're all scared. Who's it going to be next? Who's it going to be next?
The media interest just went into the stratosphere.
Suddenly, resources right around the country were coming to Ipswich to really try and nail down who was doing this.
Yet the killer was closer than anyone could have dared imagine. In 2006, Ipswich will be struck by a killing spree. In only 6 weeks, 5 girls disappeared from the streets of the red light district, their bodies found over just 10 days. The 1st of October 2006, London Road, Ipswich. 48-year-old forklift truck driver Steve Wright moved into a flat in the heart of Ipswich's red light area. Wright's younger brother Keith recalls a quiet life in their early years.
I suppose my earliest memories I can sort of really remember is we used to walk us all to school and stuff. I was probably only about 5 or 6, I don't know. And Steve must be about 14, I think. That was always good. I mean, he was always quite close with the families that way. He had, obviously had arguments there between stepmum and stepchildren or whatever.
Steve Wright's natural mother had left the family home in 1965.
I think his parents divorced when he was quite young, and he didn't see his mother particularly. He was brought up by his father, Conrad, who was in the services. His father would have lived by strict rules, and he would have expected his son to do so. So if he ever stepped out of line, then he would have been very quickly and strongly put back into line. And so I think Steve's childhood was spent moving around in different parts of the country as his dad was dispatched to different parts of the UK to work.
What he did become quite adept at was putting on a persona, an easygoing, affable, almost everyman persona, so that people could get along with him easily. That may not have necessarily been the real Steve Wright. So his early years were ones where he clearly learned to talk the talk, and those were skills that he used to lethal effect later on.
The exceptional story began in earnest on the 1st of November. 19-year-old Tanya Nicol had disappeared without trace.
Tanya was first reported missing, I think it was the 1st of November 2006, when she was reported missing by her mum.
She caught the bus into town at just after 11 p.m. It was a Monday evening, clearly with the intention of operating as a street prostitute.
Roy Lambert will be called upon to review the facts of the case.
Tanya would stand down here on this corner of this junction, and cars would come round, and they would stop and speak to the girls, and they would discuss services. The girls would get in the car and off they would go to do whatever they were going to do.
But this was very uncharacteristic, and Tanya's mum subsequently reported her as missing.
With detectives puzzled by the disappearance, concerns would grow for Tanya's safety.
And the alarm bells began to ring at that early stage, and Tanya literally disappeared off the face of the earth.
Just 2 weeks later, on November the 15th, concerns were raised for the safety of a second missing girl, 25-year-old Gemma Adams. She too had been last seen in the area surrounding London Road.
Initially, it was only one girl gone missing, so there's nothing to really, as a force, to get too concerned about. It was when the second one was reported missing, the 14th or 15th of November, we thought, this is a bit unusual.
Gemma Adams was reported as missing to us during the early hours of that morning.
Her boyfriend had taken her down into the red light area to do some work, and he was anticipating seeing her after a period of time. And I think what happened was that she didn't come back.
You know, the sort of girls who would just go away and not come back for days, and it's like, oh, they've just gone on a bend or they're doing whatever. But you know, the girls who are sensible, had their partners or whatever, they wouldn't that's not their normal routine to do that.
Friends of Gemma were becoming worried for her safety.
No, Gemma was a really kind person. She was a really nice person to talk to. She weren't a person who would double cross you, who would like be proper like nasty towards you or backstab you, steal off you or anything like that. She weren't that sort of person. She was the opposite, polite, nice.
As the authorities gathered more evidence, their concern would grow also.
Because of her lifestyle and the fact that she might have gone off with a client, initially there was not great concern for that first couple of days, but then when the phone went off completely off the network, I mean that was the big indication that something serious might have happened to her.
The 2nd of December 2006, 11:40 a.m. Himplesham. The developing story would open a haunting new chapter.
The weather was exceptional for that time of the year. Everywhere was in flood. I got into the lakes, and because the floods had receded, the first thing I done was, well, not the first thing, was just check the grounds, check the lakes, then got my waders on, and then patrolled the brook, and I suddenly noticed, like a man, it was done.
Upon closer inspection, Trevor would find himself horrified at the true nature of his discovery.
It was not until I got into the brook and got up right beside it, and just moved the hair a little bit, moved the debris away from my hair. Then that was when I suddenly realised that, no, it's a young body. And my first thought was, it's one of the missing girls. Well, at first, sort of maybe jump back a little bit. And then I had to sort of take control of myself and got straight out of the brook, still shaking, and phoned the police.
Yes.
Maybe at that time where I phoned them,
We're here.
11:44 when I phoned them, I just phoned them up and said who I was, where I was, and that I'd just found the body of a young girl face down in the brook.
Which one was it? That was mine, was a spider, wasn't it? He said. These spiders again.
How are you doing?
Yeah. What did you do yours?
No, that don't get there. It's just need a bit of room. Okay, this is ticket number 95.
I got 122.
Match 3 black mounts. Blah, blah, blah. Let's do it. Blue 5. 10. 1,000. 10,000. £5. 20. 1,000. 10,000. 20. And that's a no. And a bonus. Fine crossed fingers. It's a crown.
Lose.
Never mind.
See, my losing streak's ended. This is the fourth one, isn't it? Find a money bag to win all your prizes shown. A chest, a cupboard. Oh. Suitcase.
Money bag.
Find a money bag to win all of the prizes shown.
No, hang on, no. Find a spider.
Oh, I thought it was a money bag, that. Oh, that's a spider.
It's a spider.
I can't fucking see. I've got the wrong glasses on.
You gotta find a spider.
What was that? A light bulb?
Light
That looks
bulb.
like a money bag from here. My
No.
glasses are screwed. I'm going to lose. I know I am. Yep, told you.
We both lost.
Cool! And that's the gambling
That's
for the
it.
fortnight over with.
That's it.
Only £2, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. We don't usually do that. But very often. Not
Ever?
Not ever.
That's the first time we've done that between us.
Yeah. Scratch cards doesn't really
No.
interest me very much anymore.
Yeah.
It sounds stupid, I know, but
I need to get stronger glasses.
yeah, but ain't they done all? Ain't they maxed it?
No, not for these. Not for these ones. No. No, only for the small stuff. No, me really high strength ones.
No, max. That's already maxed out.
That's maxed out now. I can't do anything about it.
So it's the other ones.
Yeah. Yep.
Yay!
No.
Well, just what I need.
The 17th of March 1985, and Gil Carrillo, the young homicide detective with the LA County Sheriff's Department, was called to an incident in the Rosemead district.
Sunday evening, 10:40 at night. Call comes in, very typical. Okay, Gil, you got one dead, one wounded. I'm just going to work another routine, mundane murder.
Carrillo didn't yet know it, but this murder would be anything but routine.
identification on Village Lane. Gail Okazaki was lying on her back in the kitchen. She had sustained a gunshot wound to the head.
34-year-old Dale Okazaki had been unloading groceries when a man entered her apartment and executed her where she stood.
I can still see her today.
Dale's flatmate, 22-year-old Maria Hernandez, had also been shot at point-blank range, but had survived. She didn't recognize her attacker, and nothing had been taken from the property.
We just had our work cut out for it. We didn't know if there was an angry boyfriend, it was a home invasion robbery gone awry, what it was.
Detectives then learned that the killer had struck again.
It occurred about a half hour later. It was in the same general area of town, and the same gun was used.
In nearby Monterey Park, 30-year-old law student Sei Lian Yu had been driving home when another driver forced her to stop, then shot her twice in the chest at close range.
Almost immediately, we were aware that we had some sort of a serious going, not knowing just how big it was going to get or grow.
The nature of the crimes was not typical of a serial killer.
The overwhelming majority of serial sexual murderers kill up close and personal. Manual strangulation, ligature strangulation, multiple stab wounds, blunt force trauma. Very, very rarely do they shoot somebody because it's too cold and too impersonal.
On the morning of March the 27th, the bodies of 64-year-old Vincent Thazara and his 44-year-old wife Maxine were discovered in their home in the pleasant suburb of Whittier. The same gun had been used, but behavior at the crime scene was significantly different. Vincent Thazara had been shot as he slept. Maxine had been shot and stabbed repeatedly, and the killer had taken a gruesome souvenir.
The woman's eyes were gouged out, not to be found.
Many serial murderers take souvenirs from people that they kill, whether it's a piece of flesh, piece of jewelry, something. It is a concrete reminder. It's something they can see, something they can hold on to, something that says, wow, you did this.
On April the 15th, 2 weeks after the murder and mutilation of the Zazaras, the killer appeared to have struck again. Linda Martinez was called to process the crime scene at the home of William and Lillian Doy, a couple in their mid-60s.
There were casings on the living room floor. Mr. Doy was still in his bed and he had been shot. Mrs. Doy's room was next to the master bedroom. She was an invalid, so she had her own room. She had been sexually assaulted. It always is distressing to go into a crime scene.
William Doy had been quickly dispatched with a gunshot to the head. 63-year-old Lillian had been restrained with thumb cuffs, beaten, terrorized, and raped. But the killer had let her live.
It was unusual for a serial murderer to have two people shooting one and acting like a serial murderer with the other one.
Men he was killing because they were the obstacle to get to his lust, the women.
It was an issue of control. It was an issue of not being overpowered. What husband or man would lay there and not intervene in trying to keep his partner from being attacked.
Despite the many inconsistencies, Detective Gil Carrillo suspected that just one man was responsible for all the crimes.
I felt very strongly there was a serial killer going on. Back at the time, there were two renowned psychologists, one from New York and one from locally here in the West Coast of the USA, essentially said that we were full of hot air, that one man was not capable of performing what we were alleging.
6 weeks later, in the leafy city of Monrovia, two sisters, both in their 80s, were discovered in the home they shared. One had been raped. Both had been severely beaten with a hammer. Here again, there was something new.
There was a whole aspect of the occult.
There were some pentagrams, some things written on the wall. There were some markings on the body.
The crimes appeared related, but defied the current theories regarding serial murder.
When I was first contacted about the murders, police were baffled. They had no idea who was doing this, how it was happening. They wondered what type of a person would have done this. I mean, was it a maniac? Was it a group of people? Because don't forget, in California, they had Charles Manson, who, with his cult, went out murdering an awful lot of individuals. But my impression was that it was a single individual. It was someone who was not insane, who was not showing outrageous behaviors, and that he was probably young. He was probably either Caucasian, Hispanic, but he was certainly not a standout in his community.
The press would dub the mystery killer the Night Stalker, and those who had known him would never have suspected what he was capable of.
He was an ordinary kid, no different than the rest of us.
He was friendly and he was nice and he was so funny. He was so funny. He would always have me laughing.
And the Night Stalker's reign of terror had only just begun. May 1985, and the Night Stalker had only just begun a series of crimes that would both sicken and terrify the residents of California. Preying on the unsuspecting citizens in their homes, he took place in rape, murder, and mutilation. As the crimes escalated, detectives raced to try to identify who was responsible for the shockingly vicious attacks. Who was the Night Stalker? Richard Ramirez was born in 1960, the last of 5 children to Mexican immigrants living in the Texan border town of El Paso.
El Paso was a town of about 500,000 people, and across the Rio Grande was Ciudad Juarez, which had 1.5 million people, about triple the size of El Paso. It's a heavily Hispanic population.
It was basically a very quiet town, a very quiet place to live.
Ramirez had a humble upbringing, typical to his neighborhood.
It was a low-income neighborhood, but it was nice. It had green grass in front, and the house was painted. It wasn't shabby, but it was quite small.
We were like lower-class people, and everybody used to just hang around together at night. We would all play games. All the neighborhood kids would get together up until everybody's parents started calling them in for dinner.
Richard's father was hard-working and strict with his children.
He was very much what I would classify as someone from Mexico who had come to El Paso and had scratched out a living here. He worked for the railroad. it's a hard scrabble when you're a first-generation immigrant to learn a new language and try to scrape a toehold in a new country.
The young Richard Ramirez appeared no different from his friends and neighbors.
They were all very nice. Normal neighborhood family, just like mine.
He was an ordinary kid, just like the rest of us. We went to school, minded our manners, did what we had to do, but no different than the rest of us.
He was friendly and he was nice and he was so funny. He was so funny. He would always have me laughing. We used to play this game called Kick the Can, and he was the fastest runner, so we always wanted to be on his team.
Richard's friend Patricia found him kind and caring.
If we wanted to take a shortcut to school, we had to cut through this really tough neighborhood. And he always used to wait for me, sitting on a little pony wall, and then he would walk me to school. It was always safer, to be in twos, I guess.
But by the time he turned 10, it appeared all was not well with Richard Ramirez.
He used to sit in back of me in 5th grade. And I remember that he would, and every time he would poke me, I would jump up. And so that time that he kept poking me, I turned around very upset and I said, hey, stop. And I remember him like slumping over and then just hitting the floor on the side.
He would have seizures. He would be shaking. We knew he was sick.
Ramirez was diagnosed with epilepsy, a condition that would affect him for much of his school life. As Ramirez approached his teens, he grew distant to his father and began to look up to his cousin Mike. A Vietnam veteran who boasted of many atrocities while in service.
The cousin kept multiple mementos of his time in Vietnam, and he pulled out this box and showed all of these photographs of the women he was raping or the heads he was cutting off. It was a fascination. It wasn't recoiling in horror. It was like, wow, look what you've done.
At the age when his sexuality was being formed, Ramirez was exposed to images of rape, torture, and murder.
These individuals are in their fantasy lives from early adolescence, and in some regards, some respects, their fantasy life is more real to them than reality. Their fantasy lives are filled with sadistic aggression, where there's a sex and aggression.
What are you doing?
Ramirez later claimed that his cousin Mike gave him a front row view of his brutality.
He watched this cousin shoot his wife.
After a petty argument at their apartment, Mike shot his wife in the face, killing her instantly.
And it stuck with him, not in the sense that it was a bad thing, not in the sense that how could you do something so horrendous? I mean, oh my God, being sick to your stomach. He was fascinated.
The fantasies of those that have committed serial crimes have been very carefully studied by the staff of the FBI Behavioral Science Unit over the years. The fantasies start very early in life and oftentimes are a result of some incident that triggers these thoughts. And once the fantasies become sexualized, it becomes extremely dangerous because they start fantasizing about events of rape, torture, mutilation.
I did not notice anything strange of him until we were in high school. And he was no longer part of my clique kind of thing. That's when I noticed that he was different and he had changed could no longer say hello, that kind of thing. I noticed that he would hang out with boys that did drugs.
A lot of second-generation immigrants sometimes get involved in gangs, and some of the thinking is that they see that their parents have come to America and have worked really, really hard and have very little to show for it. And some people think that there's a disillusioning on their part, like why play by the rules if this is what you end up with, which is what my parents had. And I suppose you could say that might have been a factor in the rebelliousness of Ricky Ramirez.
Ramirez became interested in hard rock and Satanism.
A lot of kids, high school kids, for instance, were dabbling in this, and they would give it their own little touches. And being high school kids, the brain's still developing, they're developing. A lot of them got in trouble and went the wrong way. We did have some kids that killed their parents and things like that.
Ramirez dropped out of school and began living on the fringes of society, sometimes sleeping in the local cemetery.
Right from the get-go, Richard stole anything that was loose and anything that he could pry loose. I mean, his neighbors started calling him Didos Fingers, and they call him Ricky Rabone, Ricky the Thief.
After the attempted rape of a guest in an El Paso hotel, Ramirez moved to California.
He became a cocaine and alcohol addict. He lived in what's called Skid Row in Los Angeles, which is a pretty scruffy area. I mean, there are people doing everything and taking everything, and homelessness is not an unusual thing. You live in what's called a flop house, where you go and flop to get off your high or to recover. Now, did the drugs affect his brain functioning? Did it affect the way he saw the world? Probably, but it wasn't causative. It didn't lead to make him kill. He was already primed.
Ramirez lived day to day, taking drugs, using prostitutes, stealing cars, breaking and entering.
So he would go out in the suburbs where often they did not lock their doors at night even. They didn't lock their windows. This was like heaven for him. This is exactly what he was looking for. And he would go through the unlocked doors and unlocked windows. Sometimes he would go in and burglarize when nobody was home at night. And then he got bolder and bolder and bolder.
The vast majority of burglaries are for material gain. These are usually drug people who want to get some money to buy drugs, and they might do it with a friend or a partner, and so on. But there are a small group of burglars that are sexually motivated, where the burglary itself is motivated by an urge to look, sexual stimulation through looking. And since about 50% of burglaries occur in the evening, when the victim is likely to be home, it's very easy to see the progression from voyeurism to break and entry to sexual assault or to sexual murder.
By May 1985, Richard Ramirez had killed at least 5 friends, and his violent home invasions were about to escalate, plunging the people of Los Angeles into panic. In 1985, Los Angeles County was in the grip of a vicious serial killer. Ordinary citizens were no longer safe in their homes, as the mysterious killer, christened the Night Stalker, raped, murdered and mutilated in the name of Satan. The dreadful and indiscriminate crimes caused a wave of fear.
Everybody was scared. Everybody in the county of Los Angeles and Southern California was scared to death.
Gun sales seriously went up. Vast increase in gun sales. During the summer of '85, people were keeping their windows closed.
It was a very, very hot summer. I would not open the windows at night. We sweltered in our house every night because I was afraid somebody'd come in and kill me.
And still the violent attacks continued. In Burbank, on May the 30th, a 41-year-old woman was raped, while her 12-year-old son was locked, handcuffed in a closet. She was allowed to live. On the 27th of June, the body of a 28-year-old teacher was found in Arcadia. She'd been sodomized and her throat slit. On July the 2nd, again in Arcadia, a 75-year-old woman was found dead. She'd been beaten, her throat cut, and her home ransacked. Detective Gil Carrillo was convinced just one man was at work, but the facts flew in the face of received wisdom.
Here he was crossing all gamuts, and the only consistency was his inconsistency in the way he was committing his crimes.
What the FBI was telling us is that serial killers tend to operate in the same way. They use the same weapons, the same method of operation. But there were different weapons used. There were two separate guns that were used throughout these events. There were knives used on a couple of the occasions. There were bludgeons used on a couple of the occasions. These are all differences in the method of operation.
On July the 5th, the Night Stalker targeted a quiet suburban street in Sierra Madre.
Ooh.
He entered the bedroom
Swears.
of 16-year-old schoolgirl Whitney Bennett.
You talk about a nightmare. Her parents awake, her crying and coming down the hall. They find her in her bedroom on the floor, covered in blood. The suspect had entered the house, confronted her in bed while she was asleep, and beat her with a tire iron. And tried to strangle her, and left her for dead. 4 feet of sutures ended up in her head, took to close the wound. As you work these cases, or you're in law enforcement for a long period of time, you see a lot, and it has to have an effect. I know it takes its toll somewhere down the line. I've seen it.
The 7th of July was another in a long run of swelteringly hot nights.
I'm home alone. It's the first time I've slept with my gun on the nightstand.
Everybody was afraid and kept their doors locked, windows locked. But the night was so hot and our summer was so hot, so here I had the doors open.
In the middle of the night, Detective Carrillo awoke, convinced the Night Stalker was in his own house.
I woke up. I was sweating. I was nauseated. And I got my gun, and I cleared my house as if I was looking for burglar. All of a sudden, the phone rang. It scared the bejesus out of me, and it was my desk telling me to call my friend Linda.
In the early hours, crime scene investigator Linda Martinez had awoke with a start.
About 3 o'clock in the morning, my friend said, someone's calling your name, somebody's yelling for you.
Linda's neighbor was crying out for help.
I went to the back fence and called across the street to the lady calling me and asked her what was wrong. And she told me that she had been robbed and raped and she was handcuffed to her bed. Once I heard her voice, I knew it was him.
Sophie Dickman, a lady in her 60s, had been sexually assaulted. She was raped. And,
Detective Carrillo recognized all the hallmarks of a Night Stalker attack.
I learned that he had verbalized words that were common that we had heard in the past. Words he had spoke there. Where's the money? Where's the jewelry? Shut up, bitch. There was no doubt in my mind we were dealing with the same guy.
His suspicions were confirmed by the discovery in a nearby home of the 61-year-old Joyce Nelson, beaten to death with a blunt object. The Night Stalker had struck twice in one night. And he would repeat the trick just 2 weeks later, on the 20th of July, first shooting Max and Layla Needing at their home in Glendale, before moving on to Sun Valley.
We had a couple lived in a home. The male had been executed in his sleep. The woman had been sexually assaulted. And there was a young boy there that also had been assaulted.
Ramirez had again dispatched the husband as he slept. He had repeatedly beaten, sexually assaulted, and humiliated the mother, demanding that she pray to Satan for her life, and then raped her 8-year-old son.
It was not enough just to murder or to rape. He had to torture, and he loved to terrorize them. He would make them say, "Hail Satan."
Humiliation of victims is very, very typical in serial sexual homicide. This is arousing to them. This reassures the offender that they are in such complete control that they can degrade and humiliate the victim any way they want. Nothing could be more stimulating for an individual with this deviant sexual arousal pattern.
No one was able to predict or prevent the Night Stalker's crimes.
It's typical of serial killers to choose people who put themselves at risk somehow, like male or female prostitutes, like hitchhikers. But these other people, they were living their normal lives. They weren't doing anything at all that should have brought this down on them.
And the panic escalated.
The publicity of the killings was like a drumbeat. The more killings, the more publicity, the more fear.
Hello, my name is Detective Gil Carrillo with the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department assigned to Homicide Bureau. And the Sheriff's Department is currently conducting an investigation into a series of homicides and sexual assaults that have occurred in Los Angeles County.
I knew how vicious and violent, and how vile he really was, and there was an enormous amount of pressure to stop before he hurt anybody else, even more so before he hurt somebody in my own family.
People were buying guns, people were buying guard dogs, people were scared to death.
The suspect has used guns, knives, tire irons, as well as his own shod foot to inflict serious injury to several victims in the past.
Nobody knew who it was. Nobody knew where he was going to hit. People didn't know if they were going to live to see the next morning. It was really, really scary.
And then a shocking twist.
It was very obvious that our killer from Southern California had now struck in the city of San Francisco.
On the 17th of August, the Night Stalker had shot another couple in their home, leaving a satanic symbol on the wall. A week later, he struck 50 miles south of Los Angeles, shooting the husband and sexually assaulting the wife, forcing her to swear her love for Satan. With the killer on the move, detectives were now working night and day to try to catch him before he struck again.
Since the last taping, which was August 13th, 1985, the suspect in this case, currently under investigation, has committed 2 more homicides.
I have the pressure of the world on me. I need to save not only my immediate family, my wife, my mother, and my kid, everybody, but the citizens of Los Angeles County. There's an animal going out there. I have to solve it.
The vehicle used in this crime was a 1976 Toyota station wagon. If the vehicle is found abandoned, contact Sergeant Frank Salerno or Detective Gil Carrillo?
My wife found my 13-year-old daughter crying in the bedroom. And she said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "Nothing." And my wife said, "Something's wrong. What is it?" And she said, "I just wish this were over." I just want my dad back.
Detective Carrillo didn't yet know it, but before the end of the month, he would be face to face with one of history's most heinous serial killers. By August of 1985, the Night Stalker had killed at least 13, terrorized Los Angeles County, and pushed investigators to their limits. Now he appeared to be on the move, and detectives feared he'd be even harder to catch.
Where we'd had him localized in Los Angeles County, now all of a sudden he's in the city of San Francisco. That was of great concern.
But by the end of the month, a number of important leads finally came together.
We actually, through informants that identified him, we knew where he hung out. He liked drugs, and he used to hang around Skid Row area. At the same time, there was a fingerprint recovered on the rearview mirror of a stolen car that the killer had used, and they made Richard Ramirez off that fingerprint. The sheriff of LA County, the chief of police of LA City, the chief of Denver decided that they were going to release a picture of the killer, Richard Ramirez, to the press immediately.
When they showed him, I told my husband, "Oh my God, look, that's Richie. That's Richie," but that was so weird because I can't comprehend him doing something like that. Not with his personality.
We were in shock. I just knew what I knew of him as a child, and I was just shocked. I was just shocked.
On the morning of the 29th of August, 1985, Richard Ramirez arrived in Los Angeles after visiting a brother in Arizona.
Ricky walked into the nearest convenience store to buy some candy, and he noticed people were looking at him. And then when he would look at them, they'd look away, of course. And as he was waiting for his change, he looked at the newspapers on the counter. And every paper, there were 4 or 5 of them then from LA and from the area, every paper had his picture, his photograph. And then one woman, she said, "It's him, El Matador," which is killer in Spanish.
Ramirez panicked and fled.
So he started running through yards, crossed over fences. He climbed about a 9-foot sound barrier wall. As he went through yards, people were calling in. They were calling to the Los Angeles Police Department, saying, "Somebody's coming to my yard. I have a prowler."
Hello?
Members of the Los Angeles Police Department were all
That's the pink
They
car.
were following the 911 calls.
Ah.
Continued running
Hey,
east
hold
in a
on,
northeasterly
don't.
direction and made it all the way to Hubbard Street.
He tries to carjack
Yeah.
female resident. She screams.
We were actually
You know me, I like a challenge.
We heard a bang, then a scream. We ran out here. We noticed a tall, dark, skinny guy running, and my dad right behind him. We just came running as fast as we can to assist my dad and the neighbors.
Richard has been running for about 2 miles.
Pretty much.
Tonight I've got to make,
about here.
what is it? I've got to bag up gyros, haven't I?
Right here up
Chicken
against
gyros.
the fence.
Citizens come out and
Well,
surround
that's 6 bags of them we've got.
Right here.
Nearly a week's full, lad.
He was bleeding because one of the
Well, it'd be
neighbors
more than that, because them
was,
bags Or
fence
doing more than fucking
right over the head.
like,
Like perspiring and puffing and puffing and looked very tired and scary. He looked very scary actually. People just started coming out with the newspapers and saying that's the killer, the matón. That's just, you know, a Night Stalker.
With Ramirez in custody, officers would now come face to face with the killer for the first time.
When I saw him, he just had this evil look in his eye. He just looked so sinister, as if he were possessed. He just looked evil.
I remember playing with his anxiety level, trying to make it go up and come down. I wanted to see what I could do to raise it or lower it. And Richard was almost to the point of hyperventilation. His head was down on the table and he's going, and for a millisecond, just for a millisecond, I'm becoming somewhat nervous. I knew that this guy was into Satanism, and all of a sudden when he starts hyperventilating, I'm saying to myself, if this guy starts levitating, I'm out of here.
This is a guy that, although at times there were photographs taken of him that he looked like, wild man, he's not somebody would point out and say, there goes that crazy SOB, because he just doesn't come across that way.
He was much more intelligent than I envisioned. People think of him as a crazy man. I didn't think he was crazy. He was much more articulate than most murder suspects that I've ever viewed.
Ramirez revealed he was well schooled in murder.
The impression I got from him was that he was well read, even though he had dropped out of school, I think after the 9th grade or so, thereabouts. He was very interested in murder and killing and past serial killers, because he'd done a lot of reading on that.
He could tell you everything about serial killers from the time the Romans fed the Christians some lions to modern day serial killers. When we took him to his first cell, and he found out that that was the cell that Angelo Bono, who was part of the Hillside Strangler duo, that's the cell he was in. He was excited.
The Night Stalker had petrified California and haunted detectives Salerno and Carrillo for 5 months. Now he was finally behind bars.
I remember seeing my mother and a couple of my sisters, and they came up and I started crying. It was over. I said, it's okay. It's over.
In 1989, Richard Ramirez was found guilty of 13 murders and 30 attempted murders, rapes, and sexual assaults. He was sentenced to death. So what drove the Night Stalker to his ultimate destiny as one of history's most savage serial murderers? Were the lessons he learnt in his upbringing to blame? Or was Richard Ramirez born to kill?
I don't see anything in his upbringing that was any more unusual than a lot of people. I know a lot of successful people have gone through hell being raised and come out just fine. This could be a case, and it probably is a case of when he was conceived, he's a bad seed. No matter how he was raised, he was dead.
Smudge, what are you doing? Smudgy, what are you doing? Don't ask me what that cat is doing. Just me. Oh, man. When you came, when you drifting away. Wherever that goes. But that'll do it. I will be live later on, so I'll play some games as usual. Lots of love to you all. Take care now. Bye, everybody.